Welcome to Bounce Back Stronger, the podcast that explores ways to find peace and purpose no matter what happens. On today's episode of Bounce Back Stronger, we're joined by award-winning artist Anila Quayyum Agha. A little bit about Anila. Anila is an internationally celebrated multimedia artist known for her breathtaking large-scale installations that explore light, shadow, identity, and belonging. Her award-winning work has been shown in major museums across the United States and around the world, from London to Turin to Venice. Anila's pieces often emerge from deeply personal questions about home, exclusion, migration, and the universal desire for connection. Through intricate patterns and immersive environments, she invites us into a contemplative space, one where light and shadow coexist, much like beauty and pain in our own lives. Anila, thank you so much for joining me on Bounce Back Stronger. I'm so honored to have you on the podcast.
I am so honored myself to be invited. This is amazing for me. Thank you so much.
Ah, thank you. And I saw your work at the Missionary Museum up in Doylestown, and it just took me in. So many beautiful pieces. Maybe tell us a little bit about that installation. And I guess it's 2 decades of work.
Yeah, the title of the show is Interwoven. And when I was approached by Jeremiah William McCarthy, who is the curator for that exhibition, and it's a traveling exhibition till the middle of next year, maybe till August, I believe. That'll be the last show in Tennessee at the Frist. We'd talked and we'd met, and he had shown interest in doing a exhibition, a single one. But once he started looking at my work in depth, he came up with the idea that I need to do your work justice by actually doing a retrospective that's like a mid-career, so that we can, instead of just showing a few light pieces and a few flat works, we kind of do the chronological kind of thing of where you started and how you got to where you got at the end. And so the exhibition is really quite interesting for me as an artist to see my own work from the outside, looking in and realizing that there are particular through lines that went through the entire work throughout the years over the last two, maybe slightly longer than 2 decades, and why and how I made the work. And so for me, I was quite honored, of course, that he chose to do that. And then the Westmoreland supported him in his endeavor. Wonderful individual to work with. If you read the forward for
Hmm.
the book that he wrote, it brought me to tears because I was like, people have not really given it as much thought as he had, because often you see an artist's work in fragments
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you kind of walk through it and you say, this is wonderful. And then you go on to the next thing because people are so busy with our lives. And now with the internet, you see everything on a smaller scale, like you're seeing things
Hmm.
on a phone. And so I was thrilled to have this expansive show that shows my development and the through lines that go through it over the years. And I see a consistency in it. Every time I see it installed, because it's been installed in three museums, this is the third museum, you kind of see the space. Each space is different. And
Yeah.
so when you see it all laid out, you realize that it is very flexible work. And both the flat work and the sculptural work that is installation and has light as a material. And I was very pleased with all three museums thus far. And I think the Michener is so beautiful.
It is. It's great. The one with the red cube is just amazing. I highly recommend anybody come to see this work. It's just so beautiful. And what are some of those through lines that he caught? One of the things he said is you came to the United States and you were trying to find connection. And that really resonated with me. Just the
Mhm.
idea that how important that idea is.
When I moved to the United States, of course, I moved here with a husband and a small child.
Hmm.
That marriage didn't last because I think a lot of times When you move to a new space or a major event happens in your life, things kind of become broken. But that marriage brought me to the United States. And second to that, I was also really bored in Pakistan because I hit the glass ceiling. I couldn't seem to go beyond it. And I was really feeling stunted. And so moving to the United States at the time was a really great idea. I thought new challenges and new things to conquer.
Yeah.
And I am one of those people who don't stop. We continue to move. And there are people who are homostasis, and there are people like me who like movement and excitement. And so I think I came to the US seeking a lot of different things. And if I could go back in time and tell that young person, maybe it's good to be with family also, to raise a
Mm-hmm.
child, that would have been smart too. But that's how life unfolds. You, in retrospect, can see some of the things. But some of the through lines at the time when I started grad school, I had become very interested in explaining to people where I came from because I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to have conversations with people where they didn't understand that Asia is a huge continent. South Asia, where I come from, has a very strong culture and very strong artists. And for example, the Indus Valley civilization originated from that part of the world. Alexander the Great went through it to go up to
Mm-hmm.
Russia. And people in the US didn't seem to have knowledge about South Asia at all. They didn't understand that Dr. Patel and Mr. Ahmed or your gynecologists, they all come from South Asia, or many of them come from South Asia. But I don't think that they were familiar with artists coming from that
Mm-hmm.
part of the world. And so explaining where I came from became very important. And so it became about identity and gender. So the initial work was about women and me and where I came from. Because I remember there was this one colleague whose girlfriend actually asked me this question. She said, when you arrive at the airport, do camels come to get you? And that really struck me as being something that I need to change in people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because just the lack of understanding about the world was flabbergasting. And I could fill a book, telling you
With
these
that.
stories.
Yes. Yes.
And people would ask me things like, do you sit on the floor to eat? Do you have furniture in your homes? Like things
Really?
that are just, ugh. Anyway, so it started from that place
Yeah.
that I wanted to explain. And then I realized I was interested in the realization that when I was living in Pakistan, I was often discriminated as a woman. And when I moved to the United States, I was discriminated as an immigrant. So those things kind of tied together in my
Mm-hmm.
mind. And I kind of started making work about that place where you don't belong and you're looking for a place where you fit. And now that I've grown older and I realize that I chose this place of being always looking in, but never being in. Looking in, observing, being observational. So that's what kind of often makes its
Mm.
way in my work. So that was the second through line, the discrimination and wanting a home, wanting to belong, wanting to have a community. And so to amplify that, I started using materials that are often associated with women's work,
Yes.
textiles and embroidery or beading or weaving and stuff like that. And my master's in fine art is actually in fiber arts.
Nice.
And that gave me a lot of facility in using materials and processes to fit my content. And so making work about women, using materials that women use
Mm-hmm.
often, and considered craft, so less important than fine art because the men have a province over that. So it kind of kept growing and bigger and bigger. And I think the surrounding of it is now encompassed by global warming and the
Mm.
weather issues and climate change and colonization and the aftermath of colonization. And I think it is become like the dominant factor because I believe human rights are connected to climate change. And in my mind, when I think about making anything, it kind of makes me wonder and also realize that the global north has stolen and colonized the global south and Asia to a very large extent and taken much of their resources to make their cities and their countries beautiful and powerful. And but now that climate change is going to be affecting the global south, there's a lot of resistance towards refugees and immigrants. And those are the people and those are the countries that were decimated because their resources were stolen and the humans were stolen in large part because the Caribbean first got people from India, Hindustan, when it used to be Hindustan, as servants
Yeah.
that were often not paid. Or for generations, they were like it was domestic servant servitude and almost like they were slaves without being called slaves. And then the
Mm.
idea of let's bring people from Africa to the Caribbean, and then it started spreading into the Americas. And I think that those are the same countries that are going to again pay the price of global warming.
I never thought of that actually. That's really fascinating.
Me, that is like part of human rights. And
Yeah.
who are the first people that get affected by all this is the vulnerable populations that are often female. And it's come full circle for me. And I come from there. I was one of those women.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to reflect the beauty and the sadness of the loss simultaneously
Yeah.
to also create contemplation in people's minds and make them realize that everybody gets a sunset. Everybody's culture is wonderful and beautiful, and also everybody's culture has problems.
There's shadows. There's shadows in everything. I see that in your work. I see the looking in and then the also in looking out, the shadows of it. It is just amazing. And now it makes so much more sense to me today in talking with you about this.
It's also like the boundaries and the intersections.
Yeah.
Like
And the
we're all
structure.
connected. We're connected.
Yeah.
We live in structured environments,
Yeah.
architecture, but then the chaos of life gets in the way.
Yeah.
Just look at the way the pandemic went down,
Yeah.
how isolated we became, and how many economies got decimated, and domestic violence rose
Yeah.
to an extent where people started getting divorced because they couldn't take it anymore. And so, just the idea of how important community is, and how important dialogue is, and how important it is to be connected to people and have a larger ripples of community around you. So you can find strength in numbers and unity.
Hmm.
United, we can stand together and we can save the world, and individually, we can't.
No, I can't. So let's talk a little bit about some of the themes, a little bit about overcoming so situations where you might have had to overcome and how it showed up in your work. Because I think a theme that we talk a lot about with artists and musicians and writers is this idea of creation as a way to get through difficult times. Does anything resonate there for you?
Yeah, artists are always poor. We
Yes.
are poor in space and we are poor in economy, meaning an artist can make a dollar go farther than regular people. Obviously, I started using materials that were cheaper, meaning thread and fabric and paper. So initially, those were my ways of dealing with the expense of living here. When I came to the United States, I was allowed two suitcases. Each family member had, so we in total had six suitcases, and my one entire suitcase had art supplies in it.
Sure.
The
Yeah.
other had my clothing and whatever other precious items I wanted to bring with me. And living in the US, I have moved around quite a bit because I needed cheaper digs. So I remember I once moved across the hall just to save $50.
Wow.
My rent was 750 and the next door had a like a how do you say like a sale maybe or
Yeah.
to get new people in. So I decided to change my entire apartment to the other side so I could save
Very
50.
good.
And then people have asked me, your earlier work didn't look as polished. Yeah, because I
Mm,
was using cheaper materials. I didn't have a lot of money. I couldn't go to industrial laser machines. I was hand cutting everything. I was using materials that were lots cheaper. And then over time, of course, your finesse and your ability gets better and better. So all of those things are maybe visible in the work that you see at Michener because you see the first work and then the chronological works, and then you can kind of see how polished it got over time. Some of the other things I would say that living was extremely difficult because I had a child to raise. And in my second year of grad school, my first husband decided to move on and he left. And so I had a child, I had grad school, and I needed money. And so I would do whatever it took. I remember I was painting on velvet at the time, and I gave six of my velvet paintings to this store in downtown Dallas. I went to show them, and they were very interested. I didn't know that store was about to go bankrupt. Foolish me, I didn't make a contract with them. And so my work was used to pay off the creditors. And this
Oh,
one woman, very nicely, she had gone to the store to get something of her own, and she called me because I had attached a card to it. And so she called me and she said, I can save three pieces or four pieces or something like that. Would you like me to take them home and you can come get them? So I was so grateful I gave her one.
oh. Oh my
But I
gosh.
only
Yeah.
got, I think, two or three back, and the rest other people took because basically people were taking things out of the store. So that's one of the things I had to go through losing work. Uh,
Yeah.
and then sometimes galleries don't pay you on time when they sell your work or something like that. But the other thing at home, it was very important to keep a roof over my head. Whether we ate well or not, that was not the problem. It was not to be homeless.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would save the rent before
That
I
was the number one.
and if the car broke down, oh my God, the horror.
Yeah.
You have a question here. Many listeners turn to creativity during hard times. What does your own creative process offer you when you're navigating difficulty?
That's a good one.
During the pandemic, I had moved for a job to
Yeah.
Georgia, to the South. And living there, I realized how lonely I was because at first we had imagined that my husband would come and join me there. But then it just didn't seem worthwhile because the city that I moved to was so small. It also, Georgia doesn't really have a lot of industry outside of Atlanta. So I was living in Augusta, Georgia. And I had thought that I would have more contact with the faculty and the students, but because of the pandemic, we didn't really have much. I would spend entire days alone
Mm.
in my studio, which was on campus. And I realized one thing immediately became very evident. One day I woke up, and this was like maybe into the first semester towards the end. I woke up and I opened my mouth, and my jaw was clicking. I thought I'd broken my jaw.
Oh no.
And it was because I was crunching my teeth so much because of the anxiety. And
Yeah.
that went away eventually, and the dentist took care of that. But it was just an extremely lonely time. And I would spend like 10 to 11 hours alone in the studio. So I was extremely productive there. And I made two large installations, made I don't know how much flat work. But I started doing that work, which you
Mm.
see there.
Yeah.
I think I cut thousands of little birds and trees and flora and fauna and insects and stuff. And I started collaging them. But the first year, I just basically cut them. I made other work while I was doing, you get bored doing
Yeah.
that. So I would keep moving and keep doing multiple different things. But that was one of the things I started. And then I went and did a show at the Kew Gardens in London. And I realized during my visit, I was able to see at the Shirley Sherwood galleries the woman who had donated a ton of money to the Kew Gardens, and she was an heiress, and her father was a diplomat. So in the 1800s, they got to travel everywhere. And she would go and make these botanical drawings or nature oriented drawings that were done out of watercolors. She was
Mm.
very talented, and her work was hung in this older part of the museum. And I kind of realized it was done very, this is South Asia, or this is India, this is Thailand, this is Brazil, this is Africa, or nation in Africa, or whatever. But that lady was able to go everywhere, and she looked from the outside and painted all these. So they became these specimens that obviously started the Kew Gardens huge greenhouse and thousands of varieties of plants that they brought back. But it also kind of started this idea of the way the Europeans had colonized the world, and then they would bring back these specimens that they would show to people as entertainment. And sometimes they would even bring dead fetuses or,
Mm.
skeletons or things like that. And being a Smithsonian fellow, I was able to then further that knowledge by going to the American Indian Museum, the Asian Art Museum, the Natural History Museum, and kind of saw the dioramas that are created in these Smithsonian museums in Washington, D.C., and those really offend me because
Mm.
they are such a colonized way of looking at Native Americans, looking at early humans, and putting them in this environment. And I just kind of felt that time wasn't wasted because it took about 5 years. And now I'm sending out those paintings. There's going to be a show of those paintings included in a solo show in Singapore next month.
Amazing.
Flying to Singapore soon to go attend that show. But like the idea of taking that colonizing gaze, and I'm titling this series of new works that I'm doing, they're very figurative. They have a lot of beading and sewing. So the craft element is there. And I'm doing it all on paper. So the textile impact is visible. But I'm then encoding them and encasing them in resin. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I want them to be preserved
Yeah. Just
and for
like
it to
it's
feel like a cabinet.
nice.
So, in a sense, like ultimately, if they make it into a museum collection, then somebody in the future may see them and say, oh, that thing is not from Asia, that is from Africa. Or this tree is not from here, this fish is from the Atlantic, not from the Pacific. But I'm kind of not paying attention to how, because the Europeans didn't pay attention to that. They took willy-nilly and took it back.
Hmm.
And then sometimes you have provenance, but most likely you don't really know where something came from.
No.
Maybe in the old historical museums, you may be able to find evidence. They also did us a service because many of those things have become extinct.
Yeah.
So it's in a sense good and bad. And so these pieces are very lush, they're very vibrant. And I'm
Well, the
using,
ones behind you certainly are.
yeah, so these
Yeah.
are the one at the top.
Yeah.
Because I'm like interested in also bringing the idea of color, which has been used in a disparaging way for the global South. Yeah, they're not very sophisticated in their color choices. And I come from Pakistan where we love colors.
Mm.
I'm using color like that now. But that in my installations, I paint the rooms
Yes. They're
way because
there's
I want, like Mark Rothko, an American painter, used color and he teamed different colors together. So, obviously color impacts people and their moods and kind of helps draw people in. And then if you look at Ellsworth Kelly's work, who's also a favorite of mine, his work is so colorful and so beautiful. And so I use color to talk about this idea of exotifying things that you don't understand, or calling it craft because you just don't want to give credit to the person who maybe is making it. And so it's all very mixed and intersectional for me.
Yeah, it's all about who you are, and then you're educating us about so many things in that art, in your
But I don't,
creations.
I never want to be didactic about
I
it.
don't know. You come at it with, I don't want to say gentleness, but there's definitely the strength, but you're being gentle about it too.
I think what I learned very early on is that if you tell people strongly about certain things, then they get very defensive.
Yeah.
And defensiveness does not allow people to take things in. They put up a wall and that's that. So it has to be seamless. It has to envelop you in a gentle cover or as a quilt with feathers in it or something. So it encompasses you, but it also makes you feel good. And
Hmm.
then if you're interested, you can look into it further. But if you
Yep.
just want to be touched by the love and the comfort, then that's okay too. And so I feel like beauty is a way that you can kind of enter into, like the spider telling people, come into my parlor, let the spider to the fly. Gentle way.
But isn't that what women have done too for really our
Yeah,
whole,
for a very long time.
it's what we've had to do to survive.
You can't be angry. You can't talk about anger. You can't raise your voice in a
Hmm.
public space. You can't talk curtly to men. They get so upset with you. As a teacher, I've had to monitor that constantly. Like
Hmm.
what you say, what you put out there. And now, as a full time artist, I guess I'm kind of done with sugarcoating my pill too much. I still would like people to come to realizations in a gentle, more informed way, because light for me has always been about literacy. It's about you educate a single woman, you educate the entire family. And so that has been very connected to all of this.
Hmm.
You asked me earlier in Pakistan if I hadn't insisted on being educated and went to school on my own against the wishes of my extended family when my dad passed away at the age of 15, they would have married me off at that age. And I would have had 6 kids by the time I was in the right frame of mind to realize that I want to do something different with my life. And so that was one of the impetuses for me to kind of keep going into being educated. And it was hard. It was a slog. After my dad passed away, there was no money coming in. And so I had to work and I had to take care of my family too.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's never been easy to be an artist. Actually, my mother was so upset when she found out that I had gotten myself enrolled in the only art school at the time in Lahore, Pakistan for my undergrad. She was crying and she said, you have to study textile or fiber arts because Pakistan is at least a textile producing country, so you will have a job if you
Do
go.
that.
'Cause the first thing was that you would get married, and if the husband doesn't take care of you, you'll at least have something to fall back on. But as an artist, you can never fall back on your art. And she was crying and made me promise
Aw,
to study fiber arts. And so I did, but I have been able to take it in multiple directions.
you've been an amazing, I don't say amazing isn't the right word. You've been an inspiring success.
Oh, thank you. That is very, very, I'm honored you say that.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah. And I do have to look at time and I don't like it. So is there any is there anything that through our conversation that I didn't ask or you didn't get to say or you want to say to listeners before we go?
I would say that show curiosity and compassion, because just think about this. A person from Bangladesh shows up in New York City and starts driving Uber.
Yeah.
or a taxi. How smart is that person to be able to do that, understand maps where maps are not even available to people there? Now, maybe they are through cell phones, but when I came to the US, I
Mm.
didn't have maps. You just found your way wherever you needed to go. And so, just I want people to understand that curiosity is an excellent thing. To understand why your neighbor who may be Hispanic, why he or she cook the way they do and why their tamales are so delicious. Just open up to people, maybe that'll allow you to understand somebody else's story. People are not composed of a single one dimensional story. They are complicated. Everybody's complicated. And we have so much in our backgrounds that if we were to share, we would make it such a robust environment for all of us. Don't blame the immigrants for your jobs or your loss of jobs. They work harder than most people I know,
Very
including my
true.
husband, who says that himself. And he's right.
Very true.
And I would say that just be curious and be compassionate because you don't know what they're bringing with them, what kind of trauma they've gone through.
That's right. And continue to experience.
And also people over here, the kind of trauma our own homeless populations are facing. Our economy is, in these times, like today, we went to the grocery store and spent a lot of money, but didn't bring a lot back.
Nope. Nope. I am shocked. Let's keep going to Aldi's. Aldi's, at least I feel like I'm getting somewhere with Aldi's, but
Yeah,
yeah,
this to us.
yeah. But
But it was
anyway,
such a pleasure. And I do want to say thank you to your listeners if they do listen to me talk about this, because we didn't talk a lot about the art, but we talked
we
about.
did. But I
And
think,
all of this, all of my life gets into that.
yeah,
So I guess
I just love it. And I learned so much today, but I also just am so inspired by you. So thank you so much for being here.
you're a sweetie, and I really appreciate your time and everything. All of us, we are trying to be creative, and your creativity is making these podcasts. I'm so proud to be part of the series that you're putting out there. It's awesome. Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. You
Thank
take
you.
care.
You too.